Hello, cats and kittens. This is Alex, and I am your crochet fiberist. Please prepare to fiber. Hi, guys. Apologies for not getting this out until today. Life happens. That's pretty much all I can say. Life happens. But I am here. This is episode 7A, Rediscovered Stitches, and I believe I promised you a cowl. As you can see, I am wearing a cowl. So I've made good on my promise. This cowl is called Berrily, and while it may not make a whole lot of sense, it's not easily discerned, the title of this cowl, looking at this version. When I show you the larger version, it's going to make sense. So this is a small version. It's made out of Lion Brand's Scarfie and a K crochet hook, and let me show you the large one. This is the large one. Do you see? Do you see those crossed stitches? These are crossed shells, and they kind of look like berries, hence the name, Berrily. And this took about 300 yards of bulky, heavy worsted to bulky is probably where I would put this yarn. So have a look. As you can see, and you should be able to see, we have a lot of the Trinity stitch to work through, and then we're going to have these interesting crossed shells, and then we're going to end with those same Trinity stitches. It's a very, very simple cowl. I urge you to go to Ravelry and download the pattern, and I'm going to pop a code down here at 2009. Well, I don't know what it's going to be when I get this uploaded, but right about here is where I'm going to pop a code, and you can get the pattern for free for the first 2 weeks of its creation. So hop on to Ravelry. I will provide a link in the down bar of the video. So that's the first thing you want to do. And then you're going to want to hunt down some yarn. Now, I don't know if you got a chance to look at the yarn. Let me show you what the yarn looks like, not worked up, not crowed up. And by the way, I use the word crowed the way people use the word knit, to kind of establish that crowing is as valid a way of expressing what I do as knit is a valid way of expressing what knitters do. So let me get the yarn that is not crowed up so you can have a look at it. Alrighty. It's almost like a fiber session, because that's my favorite part of what I do. I love exploring with fiber. So yeah, just put that there. So here's what the yarn, this is what's left over. This is what the yarn looks like. There we go. And if you can take a look, and this is the large version. Scarfie is a singles, and it's, I believe, acrylic wool mix. The large size, this is Bernat alpaca, and the colorway is plum. And let's look at the consistency of the yarn. So I'm showing you this because I don't know if pattern designers always explain the method of their madness or why they chose one yarn instead of the other. In a lot of cases, if you're submitting to magazines and stuff, they kind of choose that sort of thing for you. But, and depending on the designer, there are different reasons for why they choose something. Maybe that's what they have in their stash. Maybe they're really being cognizant of the pattern and the fibers that are going to go together. I tend to fall on the latter, from the latter perspective. I really try to think about why I would use this yarn instead of something else. I use this, though to be fair, this yarn I used because it was what I had lying around. The large version in the alpaca I used because it had some qualities that I think would really make this project stand out. So, what do we see when we look at this? It looks like it's a 2-ply. Let me check. Yes, it is a 2-ply. So it's a 2-ply. It's not heavily twisted, so it's a light twist. It's like a twist enough to make sure the yarn goes together. It's a smidge tighter than just a light twist, but it's not a heavy twist. But it's a pretty even twist. And one of the other things you might notice is there is a tonal quality to the yarn. This is, I believe, 70% acrylic, 30% alpaca. So it's really interesting and to see how how the fiber is taking the dye. The acrylic takes it kind of uniformly, and the alpaca seems to take it in a lot of different ways. And I'm really curious, personally, this is an aside, whether they got a white alpaca, what they did to make the alpaca usable for this. Because alpaca, you can get some white alpaca. It's possible, and I've seen it. But most alpaca is kind of a fawnish, brownish color. So I think that might have something to do with the tonalities of the colors as well. So those were the reasons I chose this yarn. But I'm thinking about doing another one, and I figured the first thing we should do is probably pick some yarn that falls into the parameters we discussed, or, you know, plays against type, as it were. So let me pick, here's one piece, here's one project. I'm choosing this partly because my mother's favorite color, and because I've had this in my stash for a really long time and it needs to go somewhere. So maybe I'm not being as thoughtful when I come to this one. But I've got Scrumptious Aran. This is by Fiber Spates, and the colorway is Midnight, and it's 45% silk, 55% merino, and it's 180 yards. So I can make the small version. Like I said, there's about 150 yards for the small version and 300 for the large version. So this is Aran weight, but as you can see, there's some qualities that make it a little different from what I chose for the patterns. This is a tighter twist. It's not going to be as lofty as the alpaca, just because of the way it's twisted. You have 2 plies, it's gonna fluff out a lot more than perhaps 4 plies of even merino. So, and plus you have 55% silk, really smoothing out the potential project. I don't know if you can tell, but this yarn, and this is how I bought it, frankly, this yarn has a lot of pilling. That means that if I want to make this, I might drop my hook down to a J, just to counteract the fact that this is a very pilly yarn. This would be definitely either a gift for my mother or just a piece or maybe a donation piece. The only reason I wouldn't make this a donation piece is because it is merino and silk, and a lot of places want a machine washable yarn, and this really isn't. But the color's really great. It's not tonal. That's the other thing that would be a little, that isn't exactly what the other patterns called for. But I think this in a straight color is, Berrily in a straight color will still look pretty amazing. So this is one option. Let's see. Ooh, I think I will show you a couple more. Here is another option. This is one of my favorite yarns, and this is the last skein. I had like 4 or 5 of this yarn, and I made a couple of things, and this is the last bit of this yarn. So, this is Lorna's Laces, and it is the Haymarket yarn. It's a BFL singles. It's 215 yarns, 100 grams. So it's teetering on what I would consider for this particular project, just because the idea of this project is kind of an outsized cowl and an outsized aesthete. And if you use too small of a hook or too small of a yarn, you kind of miniaturize the whole effect. I don't know if that makes sense. But anyway, this is Haymarket. The colorway is Daily. Everybody knows Lorna's laces. The colors are incredible. She has a lot of really, really fantastic bases. And this is actually my favorite base that she does. So it's a singles, like this version. And I'd probably have to do this version because this is the only skein of it I have. It's a BFL, so it's shiny. So you'll get that that really pretty shine that I got on the larger version. And you'll get really good drape because it is BFL, and BFL is a long wool. It's a good wool, but it's a long wool. So you'd get that. And I think you would get pretty good stitch definition because it's a singles. The stitch definition isn't going to be nearly as good as the large one just because of the ply issue. But this is kind of spun, I don't want to say super tight, but tight enough that I wouldn't be worried using a K with this yarn. It's really, really an interesting option. The colorway might obscure the pattern, but I don't think it's going to that much. So this is a real contender for gifts. And the best thing about BFL is it's relatively easy to take care of. I could give this to a friend and not worry about them ruining the yarn. So this is an option. And I think before we hop into the rest of the lesson, I'll show you my last option. And I think this is probably my favorite. I don't know if you've been noticing in the last couple of years, but the chainette construction of yarn has become very, very popular. Woolfolk introduced a yarn called Far, and I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing it right because there are dots over the A. And I don't know if that's an omulet. I don't think that's it, but it's some kind of European marking on top of the A. So there's Far, which is really cool, a super, super soft, squishy merino. And there's an alpaca merino that's from Chablis, and there's been all sorts of yarns that have been chainette. And this particular version of the chainette I really like because it's got all the things you want. You want lofty, you want good stitch definition, you want squishy and super warm, you want a statement piece. If you want to be looked at and you want that piece that everybody can't stop staring at, I would definitely consider chainette and on the heavier side. So here is what if I do another one for myself, this is probably what I'm going to use. This is Plymouth Alpaca, what's it called? Baby Alpaca Air, and it's 220 yards for 100 grams. And again, it's right on that cusp where I would teeter back and forth, but I really, really love this yarn. I've worked this on other projects, and it's turned out excellent. So yeah, this is a really good option. It should work well in K, but I would do a swatch. And in this case, because size doesn't super matter in this project, the reason you would do a swatch is just to see if you like it aesthetically. The stitches, you're going to be doing a series of stitches that kind of tighten the fabric, and then you're going to do some stitches that kind of add a 3D effect to the fabric. And you kind of want to see how those two things juxtapose. And I think a yarn like this could meet both of those in a positive way. So this is this is my third option. I've got a couple other on the floor, including Malabria, sorry for the culling. And this is another yarn that's right on the cusp of being appropriate. This is Madeline Tosh Merino Silk. I believe it's 200 yards per 100 grams. And that would be a good option too, just because it has the slink, it has the, in this case, it has the tonal colorways. I don't remember what blue this is, but it's kind of a really beautiful gray blue, which is definitely, this would definitely be for me. I have 2 skeins of it, so I would do the large one in this. And yeah, this has the slink, this has the plies, so you're going to get good stitch definitions. This has the tonality, which means it's going to have that really dramatic aesthetic. This kind of symbolizes all the things I would do for a luxury version. If I wanted to go super luxe, do I have it over here? I don't, sorry. I was going to show you, I have Art Yarns has a 5-ply cashmere, and the plies aren't are 5-strand cashmere is probably a better way of putting it. Cashmere 5, and it's 5 strands. It's not plied, but they're all of the yarns together, and it's really, really fascinating. And if I wanted to do an ultra super luxe version, I would use that Art Yarns Cashmere 5 and then chase it with like a Shibuya silk mohair, so you'd get really a tweedy effect, and that would be really spectacular. I kind of want to work up a swatch in that just to see if that would work, because that would be really lovely. But anyway, there's a lot of options. If you haven't decided what project or what yarn you want, you should probably take a moment to do that. And I will, and then come back to me and we will talk about the pattern itself. And there are two stitch patterns. I think there's one other stitch pattern you need to know before you get started. I don't know if this episode is going to address that stitch pattern. I think this episode might just go through the first 4 rows, or if you're doing the large, the first 6 rows, because it's really, really easy. It's just a long process. So how about you grab your yarn? I'm going to grab mine, and we're gonna start our Berrily Cowl. All right. So I decided on a yarn for the purposes of this demonstration. I'm going to use my Madeline Tosh Silk Merino, and yeah. So you should have a copy of the pattern. Download it, plop it on your iThing, or print it out, and we'll get started on working our first row, which is going to be a foundation chain. Now, I believe if you go to episode 5A or 4A, and maybe 4A, I talk about doing a foundation chain. And I believe I dealt with that again in 5A. So I'm not going to deal with it again. Well, that's not fair. I will show you what I do again. But if you're still confused, I would like you to consult those 2 episodes and see what I'm doing. And if you have any questions, leave a comment on this video on YouTube. And in the next couple of weeks, I'll be setting up a Ravelry group. And if you have any more questions, you can direct them that way. So here we are. Slip stitch. I'm using my plastic hooks. I like those. Every time I travel across the country, I buy a set of these because I don't care if I lose them, and I tend to lose them a lot. I don't want to lose my really quality pieces, and frankly, these hooks work just as well as my really nice ones, so it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so slip stitch, chain 1, yarn over, insert hook into first loop, yarn over, draw through loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, right? Yarn over and draw through all 3. So that is the first of your foundation chain. It kind of looks like a little half, it looks like a half double, which is essentially what we're doing. We're doing a half double crochet. So we're going to build our foundation chain out on this. So let's look at this again. So yarn over, stick your hook through here. Now I'm going to kind of show you, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, but this loop is where you want to stick your hook. So I'm yarning over, right? And then I'm going to insert my hook through this loop, okay? Then I'm yarning over, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. And we're going to repeat that process for 59 stitches. So how about you do that and come back and we will address what the next step is. Now, if you look at the pattern, it's 59 stitches, and for the large, it's 73. And if you look on the notes of my pattern, I say that the pattern is the multiples of 2 plus 3. Okay? What that means is you need at least a multiple of 2 to work the project, but you also need 3 stitches as kind of, they help work into the stitch. They help work into the pattern. So you need, so for the purposes of this demonstration, I am going to do, I think, 19 stitches, just so you can see. But if you're working on the cowl in a serious way, you'd want to do a foundation chain of 59 stitches. Actually, I might do a bunch just because I do intend to make this pattern and I really find it beautiful. And yeah. I'm kind of treating this like a VKN, a virtual, yeah, a VCN, a virtual crochet night. I know this isn't real time, but I am definitely treating it like it is. It's kind of nice to sit here and work on a project while I'm talking to you guys. But yeah. I think this cowl would be a fantastic little gift for any of your friends. It's super, super easy, and I used to feel a little weird about putting my patterns out there because I realized that my patterns don't really look like anybody else's, and I feel like maybe it's because maybe my aesthete is too easy. I like complicated projects, but I don't work a lot of them for a lot of different reasons. But I think I've gotten to a point where I can say, you know, I'm really proud of my work and I'm not going to be ashamed of it. So here we are. I was going to do 59, but I'm just doing the multiples of 2 plus 3. So let me count that and make sure I have what I need. So we have 23 for the purposes of this demonstration, okay? What I'm going to do, and this is always a problem when you start joining, I find that I always, and I do mean that, I used to always get it twisted. But I learned kind of a trick, and I didn't learn it from anybody in particular, but it's helped me moving forward, and I'll show it with you. So hold your foundation chain facing you, and then what I want you to do is turn it into a U shape, okay? Like you're bringing it in to make a circle. And you make sure the tail of your work is pointing down, okay? And right here is where you're going to insert your slip stitch. Now, and the slip stitch is just that. Insert hook, yarn over, pull through all the loops, and voila, you've got a project. You've got your project in a round instead of a row. Now, one of the issues I find with working with slip stitch is sometimes it's really, really noticeable, and a lot of times that depends on the yarn you're working with, and it depends on how your pattern is working itself out. But here's how I've found to deal with it, and I think I talked about this in episode 5A, but if I didn't, let me talk to you here. Work your first stitch of your pattern in the row you did your slip stitch, in the stitch you did your slip stitch, and it kind of makes the slip stitch kind of disappear in the work, and when you wash and block it, you're not going to see it as well. It's not going to be so obvious. So the pattern says, I believe, HTC, half double crochet, and the first chain, and the first stitch. So that stitch you made your slip stitch in, that's where you're going to build your half double crochet. And that is just yarning over, inserting into that first stitch, yarn over, pull through the stitch. You've got 3 hooks, or 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. Okay, that's your first stitch. Now, we've talked about how to do, we've talked about how to do Trinity stitch in the round. So what is it again? Or do Trinity stitch. What is it again? Insert hook into next stitch, yarn over, pull through loop. Do not close this loop. Okay. Yarn over, well, sorry, you don't yarn over, sorry. Insert into the next loop, yarn over, pull through, right? Insert into the next stitch, yarn over, pull through. So now we've got 4 stitches on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 4. And then you're going to chain. Now we're going to follow that process until we get to the last stitch, and I will show you what we will do then. So I think we talked about this, didn't we? I'm really looking forward to seeing everybody's Berrily Cowls. Like I said, once we get our Ravelry group, which should be happening in the next 3 weeks, then we can start posting pictures and stuff. Or you could post them before if you'd like. I'm just really excited about how this project is working up. It excites me to see something that I've created, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making it. And it was really good to be back in regular crochet. Like I said, I love Tunisian for a lot of reasons, but regular crochet seems to be easier to design in for me. So all right, and we're at the last stitches. So we've got all of those. We've got your last Trinity stitch, and on the very last stitch you are going to make a half double. So in that same stitch where you completed the last last Trinity stitch, give me a second so I can show you. Let's see, sorry. Right there, you're going to create a half double crochet. Okay, and then when you're done, you're going to slip stitch onto that first stitch, which was a half double crochet. And lots of people, well, I go through both loops when I do a slip stitch. Some people don't, but so it doesn't look messy, that's how I would do it. I would slip stitch into this hole. See? Now, some people do it like that. I don't. I want to get through both parts of the stitch. So I insert my hook through there, yarn over, pull through. And we're going to do that for 4 rows if you're working the small, version, and 6 rows if you're working the large version. So meet me back next week, and we will go through the next big project, or the next big part, which is working our modified cross shell stitch. Yeah, I think that'll be next week. I hope you enjoy these classes, and I hope you enjoy the Berrily Cowl. I'm really, really excited about it, and I hope you will be too. Happy fibering!